We are a few days away from the Cowboys season opener versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And as you know, here on ADC Sports Dallas Primetime, we've been previewing the game all week long. We will continue to do so. And tonight, we are not alone in that effort. What is up, everyone? Welcome into ADC Sports Primetime. Welcome into the show. Do me a favor, hit the like button. Share the stream if you are watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Let your friends know about Primetime. You already know this. I'm your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday through Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central here on ADC Sports Dallas Primetime, presented to you by our friends over at Freeman Mazda. We will talk more about them and the ride of the week in a few moments here on the show. But we've got company. We've got a Bucs expert, the Bucs expert, ADZ Sports managing editor, the master of headlines, and of course, someone who's been covering the Bucs for a few years now. What is up, Evan Winter? Welcome into the show, man. How are you?
Hey, sorry, man. Okay. So something happened. I lost the connection. That was such an amazing intro. I feel absolutely terrible for the connection absolutely just going out. So sorry, man. It's awesome to be here, Mauricio. I'm glad to be here, and I can't believe that we are here. This is a real week of NFL football. We're talking about a game that's going to matter, and it's awesome to be breaking it down with you, man.
It's exciting. And when we think about the Cowboys and the Buccaneers specifically, we cannot help but think about what happened last year in week one. It was the NFL kickoff that time, but it was a game that really set the bar high. And I don't know if this is the same for Buccaneers fans and Buccaneers followers and media, but it's funny because in the Cowboys world, in the Cowboys community, that was the game that we held on to for most of the season as hope of what the Cowboys could be, right? Because it came down to the wire. And the idea was always, if the Cowboys could get so close to beating the Tampa Bay Bucs, they still belong in the playoffs. They can still make a deep run. Didn't end up happening, but I don't know if it was as important for Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans throughout the entire season. I don't know if you perceived it that way late in the year.
I mean, yeah, because it helped with the playoff seeding at the end of the day because it was an NFC win. And then second off, as somebody who, has been with this team for the last 20 plus years, going into those final minutes, whenever, Ryan Suckup is lining up for the kick, if he doesn't make that kick, the Cowboys win the game. You're sitting here thinking to yourself, oh my God, this team that made history over the offseason, returned all 22 starters, did all this stuff. As Tom Brady as quarterback, it's about to lose its season opening game at home to a non-playoff team, to a team that had a losing record the season before, regardless of circumstance, regardless of why it happened. So, yeah, I mean, it was a huge win. It was kind of a tone-setting win, especially for Ryan Suckup. Who made a lot of clutch kicks that year, including that night. But still, yeah, it definitely resonated throughout the season, especially at the end whenever it came to that playoff seeding.
Shout out to the Facebook chat and the YouTube chat, by the way, because speaking of kickers, we were not happy about the kicking situation on this side. Bruce says, I still blame Greg Sorline mostly. And hey, how could you not after what happened there? I mean, a lot of things happened, of course. Shout out as well to Miller over at Facebook. We've got Celia. Shout out to all of you. And as always, remember to hit the like button because that really helps out the show and getting it in front of more Cowboys fans. Now, the biggest question, I believe, is this. What has changed after 1 year? That's a topic that we dove into earlier in the week, just kind of figuring out what is different from the Cowboys this year versus last year. From the Bucs perspective, what has changed over in Tampa Bay, Evan?
I mean, obviously, you got to start with the offensive line. You lose Ryan Jensen at the start of training camp, and then you lose who a lot of people presume to be the eventual starter at left guard in Aaron Stinney. He's done for the year. Now you've got a rookie in Luke Gadecki, who is the starter going into week one, rookie out of Central Michigan, second-round pick. And then Jamel Dean is now the starting cornerback instead of Sean Murphy-Bunting, who I'm sure a lot of Cowboys fans was the one behind CD Lamb as he caught that one of those first touchdowns in the game last year. And then you've got Akeem Hicks on the defensive line as well, Logan Hall, the first draft pick that they took. So, like I mentioned earlier, you had 22 starters returning last year in the defending Super Bowl year. This year, there's a whole lot of new, fresh blood on this roster. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Cowboys respond. But, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of changes that have happened on the Cowboys side as well.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, last night, we dove into what happened there on the offensive line. Specifically, a lot of us are looking at that duo at left guard and center, and we were all thinking the same. That has to be the biggest weakness on the Buccaneers offense, right? You have a top-tier group at wide receiver. Even without Rob Gronkowski, you still have quality tight ends there in Tampa Bay. And we are thinking, how can the Cowboys exploit this? We're talking about even using Micah Parsons, blitzing the A gap and the B gaps, right? Getting him in creative spots. Now, I did want to ask you, though, on this very topic, do you see this impacting even the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play calling? Because last night we were discussing how the Bucs like to run duo. They like to bully you up front. Does losing your three starters on the inside, because I believe Jack Mason is actually an upgrade over Alex Kappa. I believe Mason is an upgrade. But does losing that continuity maybe impact how much or how aggressive you are when calling run concepts like duo, in which you need double teams to happen?
I would think in terms of duo, since you're getting support, whichever angle you're running behind, I would think that would be okay. And especially since Gadecki, one reason why they drafted him was because they called him a quote unquote glass eater. So he has the toughness, he has the physicality, but he still has a lot of discipline issues. And one way to confuse him is to disguise your fronts, send a guy like Micah Parsons from different angles, so on and so forth. So there's a lot to go into it when it comes to the interior of the Tampa Bay offensive line. But at the end of the day, they're big, they're athletic, and they're mean. So they're gonna fight to the end. You might be able to get them at the beginning, but it's not going to happen throughout the game. Regardless, it's a spot that the Cowboys are going to attack. They have to attack it. It's obviously, like you said, the most questionable spot on this team. And the big thing about Rob Gronkowski missing is, so flashback to 2020 during the Bucs Super Bowl run, Alex Kappa fractures his ankle in the playoff and the wild card against the Washington then the Washington football team, now the Commanders. The Bucs, I don't think, if I remember correctly, I don't think Rob Gronkowski ran a single route during that entire game because the Buccaneers had him, and this was before Kappa went down, and it got accentuated after he went down. But it was because, A, that was when Chase Young and Washington had that defensive front, but B, Kappa then went down, and they needed him as that extra guy, that extra help on the offensive line. So regardless, they don't have that now. So it's going to be interesting to see how these tight ends respond, how the receivers respond, especially since I believe Chris Godwin's going to be limited at best when it comes to this game, if he even plays at all.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, Samuel, with a question that, the way that he asks it is funny. He says, "Lenny is still fat." What happened with Fournette? What happened with Leonard Fournette? Because this did become a storyline. And it's difficult to figure out when these kind of storylines, start getting viral. It's difficult to figure out whether it's true or whether it's just a weird picture taken at a weird angle that makes the player look fat. Did something really happen with Leonard Fournette, maybe reporting out of shape to training camp?
No, so what happened was, and I even wrote about this on A to Z Sports.com. It was back in, I think, OTAs maybe, or voluntary minicamp, one of the two. Regardless, it was a story that happened back in April, May or June, my bad. It was a story that happened back in then And Todd Bowles even said back then, I'm not worried about him now. I'm worried about when he shows up to training camp. And then I believe, and I'm so sorry if Rick Stroud, if you're watching this right now, I shouldn't really be naming names actually if I don't know who, if I can't remember for sure who did it. But somebody on their podcast, a prominent member of the Tampa Bay media, repeated the story on a podcast in like late June or late July, one of the two. And that's when, no pun intended, like Lenny's waistline at the time blew up and it got rehashed essentially. And then
Yeah.
that's when people ran with it. Yeah, like the whole entire time, like it was something that happened like 2 or 3 months ago. So yeah, it was just one of those things where I think like it's like if you hear something on a podcast and like you write about it and you publish it and you realize like, oh shit, this was like, oh crap, this was like 2 months ago, or something like that. So I think that was what it was more than anything.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, here in the comments, we always have, here in the primetime community, there's this frequent viewer he's called Toxic Tom Downey's burner account. And as you can see from his name, he's toxic. And he's saying, Mo, I'm impressed. Cooper Rush in the show as a guest. Maybe Cooper Rush with the doppelganger here. Shout out to Toxic Tom. I had to read that one. He is one of the biggest followers of the ADC Sports Dallas channel for sure. Well, my question then, in relation to what we've been talking about is I've seen that there is some level of concern with the Buccaneers offense that maybe it's not the same as the year before. Does that really exist for you? Or do you still expect the Buccaneers to dominate as they have over the last couple of years or since they got Tom Brady?
It is going to be interesting to see what happens at the end of the day because this offense is rooted in the big play. No, no risk it, no biscuit. Even though
Yep.
Bruce Arians is not coaching this team, this is still his offense. Byron Leftwich adapts everything from his roots, his style, whatever verbiage you want to use. Tom Brady, however, being in the fold, is going to play to the strengths of the offense / to the weakness of the defense. And you would expect that Byron Leftwich is a smart enough coach and an adaptable enough coach to do that as well. So, do they do that early on? That remains to be seen because, I mean, man, you look at these first 4 games, the Cowboys, the Saints, the Packers, the Chiefs. I don't really know if you have, that hard of a start anywhere else. It's going to test them, especially the Saints, as we all know. It could cause some friction. If you're going to, if I've got to put something down at the end of the day, in which, this is that type of show, that's what we do here. I would say, yeah, there's going to be some bumps in the road early on. So especially because, like I said, you don't know the health of Chris Godwin. You don't know how these tight ends are going to fit into the offense right now. And you don't know how this interior of the offensive line is going to perform. Overall, I think they're going to be fine. But, yeah, there's going to be some bumps in the road early on for sure.
You mentioned, of course, Bruce Arians not being around. Does that have a heavy impact on game day? Because I know that he didn't call plays anymore. If I'm not mistaken, he didn't call the plays anymore. It was Byron Leftwich. But how does that impact on game days? Do you think losing the head coach is also something that will be noticeable on game days for the Tampa Bay Bucs?
I do, because Byron Leftwich, yes, he does call a lot of the plays, but in like the crucial situations, the clutch downs, that's whenever BA did have a lot of influence. And Todd Bowles is going to have a lot of influence this year too. And Todd Bowles, at the end of the day, is a more conservative coach than BA. Chalk it up to whatever reasoning, whatever, people want to deduce. But yeah, it's going to have an effect. Now, granted, does that mean that they're not going to go for it on every single 4th and 2 or something like that? No, not at all. I mean, I think at the end of the day, they're still going to be smart and they're still going to be efficient and they're still going to be effective. But I do think you're going to see a lot less, riskier shots. But at the same time, if the short passing game is what needs to become the staple of what moves the ball just because of offensive line issues, so on and so forth, they could adapt as well. But yeah, there's going to be some changes. Even though overall it's going to be the same offense, there's going to be some changes for sure.
Among those changes is, new names at a wide receiver. Of course, we know that the projected starters are, if Godwin is healthy, you've got Godwin, you've got Mike Evans, Russell Gage, Julio Jones is in the mix. We don't really know how big of a role will Julio Jones have on this team. What are you expecting there? And would you expect him to see a lot on Sunday night?
I mean, it's tough to tell right now. You think that he'd be used a lot in the red zone. That's my first impression. Yeah. And I mean, when you look at like the quartet of the that consists of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers top 4 receivers, you can use them all over the field. If you want to use a 3-by-1 set, you could line up Mike, Chris, Julio, or Chris, Julio, Mike. Chris, Mike. I mean, like, and then you could put whoever on the outside. I mean, it's just ridiculous the types of options you can select. I think at most, though, you'll see, putting a number on it, probably like 15 to 20 snaps from Julio on Sunday night. And I think a lot of that mostly will consist in the red zone. So, like, let's say like 7, 8 snaps, maybe 10. But still, they're going to use him because he had a big catch against the Colts. A couple weeks ago on Saturday night in the preseason finale. And especially since I think Chris Godwin is going to be limited at best, they're going to need him on Sunday night. So I would expect to see him quite often on Sunday night.
We'll see what happens there, because that's definitely one of the biggest questions for me, especially as I try to think, if he gets on the field, especially on a red zone situation, who's the cornerback that you put on Julio Jones, especially because Trevon Diggs, we know what he can do. We know that he allows some big plays, and we've talked about this the entire offseason, but still, he's done his job versus some of the top receivers, right? Versus Terry McLaurin, for example. He's put up some very impressive performances. It's definitely different, though, when you're facing Tom Brady and multiple of these weapons. And we saw that last year. Tom Brady picked away at Anthony Brown. We'll see if he does that again this year, because Anthony Brown ended up having a pretty good season for the Cowboys. He actually was the better graded cornerback in coverage for Dallas. So whether or not he gets tested early in the season versus Tom Brady is something that I am looking forward to. And if Julio gets on the field, I will be looking right at who lines up across from him, because honestly, I don't have a clue as to who it would be. Now, we do have some questions for Evan. I need to ask this one because I'm intrigued. Professor O says, ask Evan if he's familiar with Pittman for 2. He's a hilarious Buc fan who has trolled other teams' message boards for decades. Are you familiar with Pittman for 2 at all?
No, unfortunately, I'm not. But I do recognize the name Michael Pittman. He was the starting running back whenever the Bucs won the Super Bowl back in 2002, and that's his son that plays for the Colts now. So, but no, outside of that, no, I've never dealt with him before. Sounds like it's a good thing, though.
Yeah, it should be. It should be. I didn't know that. Michael Pittman, the Colts receiver, is the son of him, though. That's definitely new to me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and it's cool to see that happening. And hey, I drafted him in one of my fantasy leagues, so I'm hoping he has the season I think he has with Matty Ice up there.
I'm high on the Colts. I definitely am.
I think they're going to win the AFC South, man. I really do.
Yeah, it happens because I am high on the Colts. I am down on the Titans, and then just somebody mentioned this, and it's super obvious. But when you look at just on target percentage of throws, Carson Wentz was near the bottom of the league, and Matt Ryan was top 10. Just based on that, you are sure that they should have a better season offensively. And that's without including how everything else that Matt Ryan brings to the table for that offense. I'm looking forward to watching the Colts too. Let's see. Craig says the Bucs are going to run the ball. Is this still going to be the plan for the Tampa Bay Bucs, do you think?
It could certainly be the plan. And if it is, I was actually talking with some friends about this a little bit before the show started. Excuse me. If it is the plan, I don't have a lot of confidence in it because this team is a power team. Sorry. And as many questions as the Cowboys have on the interior of the defensive line, like we were just talking about, the Bucs have questions on the interior of their offensive line. And I just don't know if they're going to be able to get that push at the end of the day. Yeah. They do run some zone from time to time, and they do have a couple backs in Rashad White, Gio Bernard, whenever every now and then whenever, he's got some fresh legs who can run some zone, get outside. But then you're dealing with Micah Parsons. You're dealing with the big dime package, the big nickel package, whatever Dallas is running at the time. They've got speed on the field most of the time. So it's going to be tough to see what happens. I think at the end of the day, you just got to hope Tampa Bay can protect. This is going to sound crazy because we know interior pressure is what gets to Brady. But I think at the end of the day, Tampa's going to have to protect the edges because Tristan Wirfs has been dealing with an oblique strain for the last 3 to 4 weeks. Todd Bowles said on Monday that everybody's trending toward playing right now. So that means everybody who's been dealing with some injuries is going to play for the most part right now. We'll get the injury report tomorrow, obviously, but he's been playing hurt. So, if those edges start going, then the interior is going to definitely start going. But yeah, they're gonna have some problems tomorrow night if they can't get things settled down to the front for sure.
Especially because Wirfs is the guy that will have to handle most of the Marcus Lawrence and Michael Parsons, sometimes from the same side, right? They like to do that. The Cowboys do, and definitely one of the matchups that could end up deciding this ball game. We'll flip the field, though. Sorry?
No, I just said easily.
Yeah, we'll flip the field, though. We'll look at the Cowboys offense now, the Tampa Bay Bucs defense, because there's one trend that we're looking at. And we actually talked about this earlier before we got in here. Where is CeeDee Lamb going to actually line up for the Cowboys? Because this is a big storyline heading into week 1 of the season, which is made even more interesting because the Cowboys don't have Michael Gallup right now. So do you want CeeDee Lamb taking over that role as well as a wideout, as the X receiver in isolated situations? Now, the question will be for you guys in the chat as well. For those of you watching on Facebook and YouTube, where would you line up CeeDee Lamb, who lined up 42% of the time in the slot and 56% of the time out wide, according to Pro Football Focus? So let me know in the comments, where would you line up CeeDee Lamb? And while you do that, and before I give you our answers, and of course, before we get into it, let me talk to you about our friends over at Freeman Mazda. .net, because the ride of the week is the new CX-9 Grand Touring, and we've talked about the features of this vehicle all week long. It's got an all-wheel drive, third row seating, a very spacious vehicle, rear air conditioning. It's got a sunroof, heated leather memory power seating, adaptive cruise control, and a miles per gallon capacity of 20 in the city. That goes up to 26 when you are in the highway. But make sure you check out the pictures of the inside of this vehicle, the outside of it, over at freemanmazda.net. And remember that when you choose Freeman Mazda, you're choosing a lifelong partnership with your car dealer. Let's get into CeeDee Lamb. Who would defend CeeDee Lamb, Evan, if he played in the slot? Because I know that we are mostly familiar with Sean Murphy Bunting, but it sounds like the Bucs are also in this headed towards this trend of playing a lot with big nickel packages. What could we expect there?
Yeah, it's really anybody's guess. You would think Sean Murphy Bunting right off the bat, but the Buccaneers, like you've mentioned, have made changes. Antoine Winfield Jr., the third-year safety out of Minnesota, who is the son of Antoine Winfield, who played for the Vikings, who played for the Bills. He's been playing a lot as their nickelback. Now, he's about 5'10", I believe about 195, something like that. Just real stocky guy, but quick, shifty for his size. He's more of a physical player, and he's more of a box safety / run support / blitzer. Almost a Jamal Adams, but way better in coverage. Let's just put it that way. So, you don't think he'd be the most ideal matchup for CeeDee. And then obviously, as we saw last year, Sean Murphy Bunting was definitely not the most ideal matchup.
Yeah.
For the Cowboys, he was the most ideal matchup for CeeDee. But obviously not for the Buccaneers. Mike Edwards is the only other guy, and he is a much more better coverage player. He's more depth for zone at the end of the day. So I do think that you're going to see a lot of CeeDee in the slot for the Cowboys. Now, I could be off because I'm not as exact on their outside weapons as y'all are, but I do think you're going to see a lot of targets from CeeDee in the slot because the Cowboys are going to be able to provide some pretty good matchups at the end of the day.
Yeah, and for the most part, last year it was about 60-40 for CeeDee Lamb, as we saw in the numbers previously. And a lot of us wanted to see CeeDee Lamb play more in the slot, right? Because that's what wide receiver number ones have been doing around the league for a while now. Like you're getting Devontae Adams inside, you're getting Cooper Kupp inside, and with Cooper Kupp is different because he's in there close to 100% of the snaps, if I'm not mistaken. But you're seeing these number one dudes getting play inside, and as you can see in the comments, Tommy915 goes with the slot, Gregory with the slot, Bruce the slot. 7-Eleven though says all spots, and that is probably the most likely thing that we are going to see throughout the entire Sunday night game, right? We're going to see CeeDee Lamb just about everywhere. But I do wonder if when the season is over, this is a game in which CeeDee Lamb primarily plays in the slot, even if that is not the case throughout the entire year.
It's going to be cool, man. I can't wait to see how it all evolves because that was a big issue for the Bucs last year was inside defense. And the crappy thing about the entire situation is they had plenty of inside defenders. Even Bruce Arians said going into the year last year, he said, we've got plenty of inside guys. We need more outside guys. And It turned out like playing on the inside was a major issue. Will that be fixed this year? A lot of people who are close to the team, including myself, thought that the Bucs would take a cornerback high or bring somebody in free agency because right now going into 2023, only Antoine Winfield Jr., who I just spoke about, and Carlton Davis Jr., those are the only two defensive backs, meaning cornerbacks and safeties going with a contract with the Bucs next year. So there's a lot to prove in terms of the Buccaneers secondary. They have health issues that, they all got hurt last year. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean have had injury issues throughout their entire career. It's a total guess and it's a total toss up. If Dallas can protect, and a lot of times how the teams, especially like the Saints, who have had a lot of success against the Buccaneers in the past, what they've done, they've run max protect, a lot of max protect. And the Cowboys are capable of doing that just because, you put 7 offensive linemen or just 7 protectors in at the end of the day, a lot of times you're going to win numbers wise. But and just go back and look at Falcons and Saints tape from the last couple of years. The Cowboys can do that and they can exploit Tampa Bay's secondary by giving Dak just that extra second or two to find that deep receiver. So it'll be interesting to see how it happens, but there's definitely a lot of holes for the Cowboys to exploit if they play their cards correctly. And I mean, we saw it happen last year, so why can't it happen again this year?
Exactly, and they're going to play a lot of 12 personnel. That's what a lot of us are expecting. They did so actually in week 1. The Cowboys ran a lot of 12 personnel in about the first 6-7 weeks of the season before Blake Jarwin, who was their number 2 tight end, got injured. Now they added Jake Ferguson in the 4th round of the NFL draft. He's been looking quite good. So maybe we're going to see a lot of those 12 personnel looks in order to add numbers to the pass protection, as well as you said, and maybe try to buy some extra time, try to help out Tyler Smith, who right now is expected to be the left tackle of the Dallas Cowboys. If you were looking at the Buccaneers defense and you were trying to point one area that you think this is the area where you need to attack this defense, what would it be? Especially, taking into account what the Cowboys do.
Man, I was so hoping that there would be a little crease for me to dive in, just right what you were saying with the 12 personnel, because that's the exact segue. It's tight ends. If you go back and look at the weakness with Todd Bowles' defense, it starts in the middle, because a lot of times the linebacker is getting stretched out, or a safety's coming in to replace a linebacker, whatever's happening in the middle of the field. It's tight ends, especially athletic tight ends, especially good receiving tight ends against this defense. So if you start to attack the middle of this Tampa Bay defense, all of a sudden it reduces the blitz, which I wrote about it today on A to Z. A big thing that Tampa Bay has to figure out this year, and it's why they brought in Akeem Hicks. It's why they drafted Logan Hall. They have to find a way to get pressure with 4 guys. If you started taking away and start attacking that middle of the field of this defense, and you force Todd Bowles to, not stop blitzing, because we all know he's never going to stop blitzing. But if you can at least get him to back off a little bit of his blitzes, that forces Tampa Bay to rush with 4, which they usually can't get a lot of pressure with, no matter who you are. And then that opens up all kinds of avenues for success for this offense, especially with Tony Pollard, how, we all hope to see him being used. He's another factor in this game that, if you have a good athletic back like that who can receive like that, I mean, Christian McCaffrey has given this defense all kinds of issues in 2019, the last season he was healthy. So like I said, if the Cowboys coaching staff play their cards correctly, man, there's all kinds of ways they can attack this Bucs defense. But tight ends, that's the way to do it for sure.
And what makes it even more interesting is that Dak Prescott usually kills the blitz. He's usually one of the best rated quarterbacks versus the blitz, highest quarterback rating versus the blitz, and all of that. The chat is on fire tonight. They are just, doing their thing in the chat. Tommy915 even said, look at Mo's face. He's holding back a laugh. And then he said, este dedito te hace reír, which is kind of like, I don't know if this happens in English as well, but it's like this joke in which they go like this and they try to make you laugh in Spanish. So shout out to Tommy915. I almost laughed out loud by reading that comment. Let's see. Are the Bucs, says Professor O, wearing their creamsicle uniforms this year? I actually like those. Do you know that?
I know, not this year. So they're blaming it on some weird shipping thing. The same excuse we've heard about a lot of things for the last, 6 to 12 months. But it will be next year, unfortunately. Yeah, we won't get to see Brady in that creamsicle this year, unfortunately.
Oh, well, it's crazy that they're like a literal shipping problem for the uniforms.
It's the Glazers, man. Like the Glazers. I don't know if y'all have seen by any chance, if you've ever been on like any Buck stuff lately, but like there's this huge thing on social media where it's almost like all of Europe, it has this hashtag Glazers out thing, and they just there was a lot of controversy with them in Tampa Bay with the Bucs until they brought in Brady in the Super Bowl. Long story short, but yeah, like it does. Just put it this way: the Glazers are not liked, and yeah, they're definitely not liked right now because of the lack of creamsicles going on, especially with Tom Brady's name on it.
That's crazy, man. Well, back to what we were talking about with the tight ends. All I heard is take the receiving yards over for Dalton Schultz. I will look into that for sure. The Cowboys tight end. Now, speaking of those betting numbers and all of that, one question for you. And I don't know if when you do score predictions and all of that, so I'm not going to ask you to commit to one this early in the week, but I will ask about the total, because in the betting world, it is set at 51 points. And I wanted to ask you and the chat, are you leaning over or under the 51 points total? And it's difficult because last year it was such a high scoring game with the 31-21 score, 29 score. But now the Buccaneers are already 2.5 favorites the last time that I checked. And the total is at 51 actually. Where would you lean towards, Evan?
So 51, that would be like 27-24 game. Man, honestly, my gut at the end of the day says this is going to be a low-scoring game. My gut says that we're going to see two teams with questions up front on offense, and they have going against defenses with formidable front sevens, and that have secondaries that, yes, still have stuff to prove outside of Trayvon Diggs and Carlton Davis. But have also potential to be very, very good secondaries in the NFL. I think there's going to be some bumps, especially with Tom Brady and Robert Hainsey up front. As we all know, Tom Brady took 11 days off from training camp, which really he only missed like 3 practices at the end of the day. But those 3 practices are pretty important whenever you're breaking in a new center. So I would go under. On that. I think we're looking at probably like a 21-19 game, something like that. Something low scoring at the end of the day.
I actually also like the under, especially with so many question marks for both offensive lines and for two loaded defensive lines. Even though the Cowboys still need to figure out if their defensive tackles will step up versus the run, they still have some players. And Oza Odisu was going to take a step forward. Neville Gallimore, hopefully, as well. What I don't like is the fact that everyone in the chat agreed with us. Like everyone is going with the under, and I don't like it when people agree when people agree with my betting angle because uh, I like it more when they disagree because I like to go against the market, right?
Yes, same here. Yes, yeah. You don't ever want to feel like you're like jumping in the pool with everybody else. You know what I'm saying? Because
That's how you get burned.
exactly, yeah. Who knows what happens when you jump in the pool with everybody else?
Last week with college football starting, as soon as I saw that 60% of the money was in Oregon plus 17 points, I was like, yep, I'm going to lose that one. And hey, Georgia ended up completely obliterating them. Well, Evan, anything that you feel like we missed? Anything that you want to add to this conversation? Anything that you want to add before we go?
I do think the kicking game is going to be interesting to watch as well. You've got. Sorry, I'm blanking on Dallas's punter. I shouldn't be because he's an All-Pro.
Brian
But
Anger.
yes, Brian Anger, who was a former Buck at one point in time. But you've got Brian Anger, who is very good. You've going against Jake Camarda, who has a ton of talent. But there's a reason why the Bucs took a punter in the fourth round is because Bradley Pinion, even though he's starting for Atlanta now, he was not very good, and that was a big reason why the Buccaneers lost to the Rams in the playoffs. Their special teams unit is not good. It's struggling. It was not good during the preseason. And then you've got Ryan Suckup, who, while he made a lot of long-distance kicks during training camp, you still got to question his leg at a certain point. You've got Brett Maher with the Cowboys. I'm sorry, but sorry, I should take us back. Is it Maher who's the kicker for the
Yeah.
Cowboys? Okay.
He is technically in the practice squad, but he is our kicker.
Still
Yeah.
on there. Okay, yeah. I remembered the roster move, but I didn't know if there had been a move since then. So okay, cool. But yes, I mean you've got questions in the kicking game there as well. So and then you've got Cavante Turpin, who just looked like an all-star going up against a very, very bucket. Like it won't surprise me if he returns to kick for a touchdown on Sunday night. Like
The Bucs are weak there.
They're very, very weak. Their special teams have not been good ever since Keith Armstrong. Love him to death. He's a great dude. Yeah. But ever since he's come to town, the special teams have not been good, especially the return unit. So do not be surprised if he returns one. So yeah, that's a big angle on Sunday night to watch for sure.
Awesome. Now I'm going to take another player prop. I'm going to take the Cavante Turpin touchdown.
Do it.
I imagine you could get like very good odds on that because you don't see a lot of those return touchdowns. Bruce says Maddox better get his together. Lauren, thank you for tuning in. Bruce says weak special teams, he says, and the thinking emoji. Yeah, that's something that we're going to look forward to. Professor O says Evan is a cool dude. Seems real chill. I would buy him a beer. There you go, Evan. Well, that will be it for tonight's show. Actually, as always, do me a favor and hit the like button. Evan, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, find me at Evan_Winter. That's EVAN_Winter, like the season, and then A to Z, ATOZ, and that's it.
There you go. Professor O even linked the YouTube chat up with your account.
Appreciate
that's
that.
Awesome, as always. Well, hit the like button, share the stream. Thank you to Evan. Thank you to each and every one of you for tuning into tonight's prime time. As always, I will see you tomorrow night on the show presented to you by freemanmazda.net. Remember to check out the ride of the week on their website. And I will see you all tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central. We are so close to football, man. 2 days away. So see you then. See you mañana. Hasta luego. Adiós.